Welcome to the Real Estate Show on KMED. Pete Belcaster and Joe Brett, the Real Estate Guys, with you, and thanks for joining us here on January the 16th. We're both real estate brokers with John L. Scott here in Southern Oregon, and we get together with you once a week here on KMED to talk about all sorts of real estate-related issues, topics, you name it. We kind of got it over the last almost 6 years now of getting with you here every weekend. Can you believe that, Joe, on KMED, huh?
That's been a while, and we've certainly covered the depth and breadth of a pretty interesting market in those 7 years that we've been on the air here.
When we started in 2009, it was not a good market. It was in the doldrums, as our listeners know, and boy, have things changed since then. It is now a record-shattering 2015, as we saw, with over $3 billion in sales in the two counties. And from everything we're hearing, and everyone who comes into our show says the same thing. It's going to be another terrific year, it looks like, in 2016.
An unprecedented demand. More people move to Oregon or target Oregon as a place to move to now than anywhere else in the nation. So,
and that's scary. I hate to hear that. That just, I really do. I don't like to hear that at all.
We're going to have to build and sell them homes when they get here.
Well,
silver lining.
They're coming, and we are going to have to do that. Let's bring in our guest today. First of all, Dawn O'Grady is a title officer with a First American title. Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Dawn has been around. You know, what's interesting about today's guests, both Dawn and Cynthia Simpson. Cynthia, how are you doing as well?
Doing great, thanks.
And Cynthia is a title officer with AmeriTitle. You know, there's three title companies in the Valley, and, you know, people get to choose from them. We always talk about what stands them out differently, you know, and it's people like these two. That's what it is. But what's interesting about both Cynthia and Dawn and Joe is that they've been doing this pretty much all their adult life in this world of title and escrow, haven't you two?
I actually started, my father was the Jackson County surveyor. And so I started typing legal descriptions and learned, you know, easements and deeds and then worked for the county courthouse for a little while and then got snapped up by a brand new title company. They were growing, expanding, and they needed title people to come on board.
You like that stuff, I can tell.
Can you imagine Dawn back as a little kid following her dad around with the measuring stick and looking at you draw that kind of stuff?
I hold the transit or climb the fence or pull the chain.
Those legal descriptions are not simple little paragraphs either. They are very detailed and down to the inch.
And you need a surveyor at times, don't you? You need a surveyor.
All right, that's the best.
So, Cynthia, did you have that same experience?
No, I didn't grow up in the industry, but I felt like I did. I started actually my second year of college. I needed a job, and I fell into a title company, and it's one of those jobs you get into and you never get out.
I was going to say, you two have never left.
28 and a half years that I've been doing this.
Well, before we get on to the thing, tell people what your main... I mean, we talk about the team, you know, the lender and the real estate broker and the title and escrow officer. Your role in this whole thing is to do what?
Well, title officers actually research all of the property to determine, and it's record matters, but it's things like taxes and liens and easements and covenants and conditions and who holds title and what does the description look like. And we put that research all together, our detective work, we put that all together in a title report, and that goes off to the escrow. So as you start to close, the escrow officer pays those liens off, creates a deed to transfer title to your new buyer, and then when she's done and records, you get my final title policy. And that ensures the new buyer and often his lender. So you get two policies most commonly out of every closing.
And that's what you do. And I didn't realize until actually we delved into this a lot that I always thought they were title and escrow officers were the same people. They did the same thing, Joe, and it's not. That these two, and so you actually read all of that information. I mean, that's what amazes me more than anything else. Cynthia, you actually what do? You go read what? What are you looking for? What are you reading? Where are you finding this information?
Well, everything that gets recorded, when we talk about recording, that means it actually gets placed in the county public records. So anything that's recorded is public record. And we actually have what's called a title plan. And we post each document that comes in every day to each specific piece of property that it affects. So then when we search that property, we pull up all the documents that have ever been posted to that particular piece of property, and we put them in order, and we read through what we call the chain of title, who owned it, who they transferred it to. If somebody died, we have to look up the court records to see where it transferred in the probate. If there was a divorce, who got it in the divorce? Were there any liens or judgments out of those cases? And so we follow that down, and like Donna said, we look for the easements and CC&Rs, and we follow each and every document from the time that property was created, from the patent all the way to present date. And then that's how we put together our report. It's like doing library research project.
It's like extensive, much more than I had originally thought that you would actually go through to do this. but obviously you do, and you do that every day.
Every day, every file.
Tell me how busy the title companies are. I mean, you're both 2 out of the 3 offices here. Are you seeing the same kind of surge in business as we see in the real estate, residential, and commercial and things like that?
Oh, of course, especially 2015, and just skyrocketing numbers in commercial and, again, residential, but also the promise and hope of the new construction, new plats, new partitions, new subdivisions, and plats that now have, maybe 50 lots now starting to be available.
You're seeing some of that.
And builders
huge.
are coming back. Builders that have been kind of holding back on the market are starting to come back into the market again. Builders that have moved away are coming back to the market, so that's exciting to see. Good growth for our valley.
Man, that may be some of the first good news I've heard about that. I mean, you're talking 50. You're not talking $1 million lots and $1 million places, are you? Talking about more affordable kinds of subdivisions that are coming through that you're searching right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And some of them are in East Medford or in city core areas. Sometimes you think, gosh, it's on the outskirts of town, and those new subdivisions will keep pushing and
expanding out and getting bigger.
But they're in the interior, in the core. And, here in Medford, you think about the Cedar Links area. And they took that whole golf course, broke that out first into about 8 or 9 large cluster lots, maybe about 5 to 10 acres each. And then now they're breaking those out into more residential or multifamily.
Multifamily, which is what we need. Yeah.
Huge multifamily market right now.
Well,
which is different than the initial inspiration or vision for those properties, but it also reflects the change in the last few years to meet that demand, because multifamily housing is going to be in huge demand. Yeah.
Oh, we've had some of our guests who say, if you had $1 million, what would you invest in real estate? And I'm telling you, they're all multifamily housing, duplexes, fourplexes, because there aren't any and you can't find them, and we need them. Well, that's really good to hear. So you two would actually, they would see this information first, wouldn't they, Joe? Then before it gets to the level of the planning commissions and stuff.
Those title folks have their pulse on the market like nobody else. They see it all.
Well, when should a person use your service? Say, can I use your service if I'm not selling something or buying something? Does anybody do that often, just on your own property or things like that, or is that not part of the deal?
Normally, we have to have an actual earnest money agreement or some kind of agreement with the lender, but we do have miscellaneous reports that we can do for clients if they're just looking for status, or say somebody inherits a property and they don't know much about it. They can call and order what's called a lot book or a sort report that gives them the information. It's just not an insurance product, but it is a research product, and we do have to charge for it. But it's great information if you, like I said, if you inherit something, you don't necessarily know where there are liens on it. I wasn't aware of. Does the neighbor have an easement to go across my property? All those kind of things are really important to know. Yeah.
Now, people always ask us, clients, Joe, we talk about title insurance, right? You got to have title insurance. All right. Explain in layman's terms, Donna, Cynthia, why do I need to have title insurance? Can I buy a place without it?
You can.
You can.
You can. But
would I want to? I mean, would
your realtor would advise against that.
And lenders, and personally, I think the amount of time we've been in the business, Donna and I, I'm sure we'll share a couple of things today. Just to give you a little history, title insurance actually started back in 1868. And I kind of shared this story a lot before. So 1869, the first trans railroad was connected the East Coast and West Coast. And everybody was wanting Western growth and wanted to expand our country. We were a new country, wanted growth. Congress was encouraging people to buy real estate, to invest and go settle lands. And there was a court case that called Watson versus Muirhead that basically said this guy did some research on our property and missed a judgment. And the gentleman, Watson, who had purchased the property, bought the property, found out there was a judgment against him. It got foreclosed out. He lost his entire investment. And there was nobody to blame. So he sued Mr. Muirhead, who was called a purveyor at the time, and that was somebody who researched titles in the court works. but there was no liability behind that.
There was no
So,
responsibility.
nope.
You're
No, and
just-
the court ruled that.
Uh-huh.
That court case was pivotal because people panicked and didn't want to buy real estate, and lenders didn't want to loan on it. There was no protection. And Congress took notice, and they met, and they paved the way for real estate title insurance. And Real Estate Title Insurance Company of Philadelphia was founded. First title policy cost $5. And what it did is it insured people that if you buy this property and somebody makes a claim against that title, we'll step in and defend you.
You can defend for the title, and that's what you do.
That's what title insurance started, and all these years later, it hasn't changed a whole lot.
I'll bet it's expanded to more than more pages than it did then, and,
more
and
exceptions,
things like that, and a lot more money. Do people get in trouble? I mean, when you obviously you two do the research and find the problems. Do you find problems, and what kind of problems would you see that's potential can kill a deal or stop a transaction from going?
Well, there's just a dozen in one nutshell you can share. That one that just comes to mind real quickly. A title report came out. The buyer was excited. Great view property in the East Hills of Medford. Okay. So you'd be up above and looking out over the valley. And the title report comes out, and there's 2 easements on it. They're about 1960, and they're power line easements. And one was recorded, and it's 100-foot wide for a power line. And you visually can see that power line out there. And about 6 months later, there was another one. It looked like the same 100-foot power line. Well, you can see the power line out there. Well, what you see is not always what you'll get.
Really?
And as they started to develop and started to make plans for that new home, they found out that there was 2 100-foot strips, making that a 200-foot wide easement that would gobble up a great part of their property. And if they ever put in another main transmission line, you've got quite a vision above you.
That would look like.
Maybe a little buzz and a little zapping.
So I wonder if they bought that property. Probably not then, huh?
Well, they had already bought it.
They already bought it.
The easements were on the title report, and that's also maybe a good point to make today. Just because you have title insurance, read and understand each of those exceptions and know what they are and where they might be. Because one thing title insurance does not do is locate and designate unless the document helps us. We can't tell you where that easement lies on the ground. Okay. You start to hire surveyors and do extra research.
That's our due diligence.
That's what the due diligence part of that thing. So easements, are those is that the biggest issue? Is that the biggest thing that you see that pops up on? I'm trying to think. What else would be there, Joe?
Tax liens.
Liens would be another one. Family, that I would think.
Family issues where people have partnerships or ownership.
Oh, lots of different ownerships on a deed or something.
We came to the altar of a deal to close a deal a few years ago and found a family member that had to sign off on it, and it took 3 weeks to negotiate all that out. It put a kibosh on things because that was one little missing piece that had to get checked off on.
Yeah, are easements the top thing that you find? Is that
I say they're one of the top. There's something that could distract somebody from buying a piece of property. I think they're probably the least understood part of property.
They are not understood well. I think easements and what they do.
I'll share a fun story about an easement. When I worked up in Eastern Washington, we actually insured a property that didn't sit on a public road. They had an easement that allowed them to get from the public road to the property. And the gal that bought the property actually bought it to build her dream home and retire. And so she got out there and started building, and the neighbor complained. And she said she kept building because she had an easement. And the bulldozers all came out and were paving the road and putting things in. And the neighbor came back out and blocked the road.
Uh-oh.
And they said, well, we still have the right to do it. So the neighbor came out with a shotgun, started shooting pot shots at all the equipment. So they said, well, you're not getting paid for this. They left. She's paying for all that equipment sitting there. So she came into the title company and said, you insured me that I had an access right here. And we pulled up the report, and she did. And at that point, as we're talking what title insurance covers and doesn't, we did disclose it. She did have a valid easement. The gal just didn't want her using it.
The owner did not want
the neighbor.
The neighbor did not want the property used for the easement, even though it was there.
So we told her to go call the sheriff.
I was going to say, at that point, it's exactly what you have to do. I always heard that properties have to if you buy a piece of property, say it's enclosed, you're surrounded, that there has to be an easement granted to reach it, right? You have a reasonable expectation to be able to get to your property. Is that correct?
It is. And in this case, just to share further, the neighbor was the sheriff's wife.
Wow.
So we basically said you need to see an attorney.
Yeah.
And I moved at that point. I actually don't know how that was resolved.
I've got to know how that came out.
But easements, yes. Land, there's a statute that says that a property can't be landlocked.
Right.
But the question is, where's the access?
And along with that it's a way of necessity, and the court has to rule. You can't just force your neighbor to sign. You go to court, and they do a way.
And to get it all put together.
You may pay for it.
Yes, you probably have to pay for it. Hey, we're with Donna O'Grady and Cynthia Simpson here on Talking About Title. They're title officers here in the Rogue Valley on the Real Estate Show on KMED. Pete and Joe here. We're going to take a break and coming right back with more right after this. Real Estate Show rolls on here on KMED, January 16th. Pete Belcastro with you here, and thanks for being with us. Don't forget, next week, Brad Bennington, the CEO of the Home Builders of Jackson County, will be along, and we'll update you on the upcoming Home Builders Home Show scheduled for February 19th, 20th, and 21st out at the Expo Park. 2 weeks from today, Guy Giles will be along, and we'll update you on mortgage interest rates. You know, it's as strange as it is, even though they had that little raise. I believe in our office meeting this week, interest rates went down a little bit. So, which is good because I'll tell you, if they raise a lot, the whole shit and caboodle is going to come to a halt here, I think. Anyway, today here on the Real Estate Show, we're with Donna O'Grady, a First American Title, who is a title officer, and Cynthia Simpson from AmeriTitle here on the Real Estate Show today. We're talking about title and escrow, mostly title, because you got to have clear title to get a property when you do a transaction. And it would be surprising. I mean, we've been brokers now 10 years, and I've done a lot of transactions, both Joe and I. We really haven't had a lot of issues, with this. Normally, is that what it is? Normally, is it pretty smooth sailing, and then you run into the bumps? Or tell me how that works in your line there. Well, Donna?
Probably because you've always got that title report in your closing package. You get a copy of that ahead of time. The buyer, seller get copies. Yeah. Lender, everybody's reading. And documents, CC&Rs, are called covenants, conditions, and restrictions.
Right.
And I know, Pete, you're careful to make sure all your clients get a copy of those.
Well, when I see on any documents that say CC&R in the boxes checked,
Yeah.
I try to get them a copy of the CC&Rs for the client to read themselves, right? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
And the number one thing they look at, can you park your RV out front? Do you have to have it enclosed? Can you have a basketball standard out in the driveway? And can you paint your house pink instead of all brown and generic? And what kind of tile roofs can you put on there? And
now those show up on reports, right? That you're researching, right?
Well, actually, all you're going to see is the phrase CC&Rs and a document recorded number. You don't know what all the little details are until you get a copy and read each of those items. That's why you want your buyer.
And do you recommend that people do that?
Oh, absolutely.
Gosh, yeah.
Really? Because that's where you get in trouble, right?
Yeah. Yes, we had a transaction up in Northern Oregon when I worked up there, and the neighbors actually had CC&Rs on the whole subdivision. And one of the ladies that lived there, she's a little older, and she painted her house, and everybody in the neighborhood complained because they didn't like the color, and the CC&R said it had to be a natural color to the area, and she had painted it pink or something. And so she went up in August up into the hills during a 1-month period with this bright, bright purple flower grew. She picked them all, took them down to the paint store, and had the paint made, and painted her house this bright, bright purple color that you could see from the highway.
All right.
And they couldn't say a thing about it.
Can they throw you out?
They couldn't, because it was a native color to the area. So she was in compliance with her CC&Rs, and that was all they could do to not complain.
Well, yeah.
Well, another example of CC&R is the area over in Klamath Falls, over the Klamath Lake, has CC&Rs that say you cannot build a second story because you need to protect the view of the lake of all of your neighbors.
Sure.
Well, during the course of a new loan and a new high-rise and a second story built on, the neighbors came to rally and said, no, Judge, you've got to rule on this. they violated the CCNRs and we need you to step in and make that happen. The judge ruled the second story got ripped off.
Well, I remember that back in the day,
Yeah.
Klamath. Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
That they had to take the second story off. So those are serious things, and people need to be aware of them. The CCNR. So we got easements that you find are obviously cause lots of issues and problems. CCNRs also, obviously, if you're not aware of them, I've heard property managers in our shows over the years saying, let's talk about CCNRs and whoa, it's a lot to it. What else? What other things that are out there that entitle that come up that people need to be aware of?
Well, we also look, when you talk CCNRs, there are some subdivisions that are PUD or planned unit or
Planned unit
condos.
development. Okay.
That's where you get the word homeowners association. And I know you've probably had some not all of them will. It's only in those certain PUD style, because there's something in that project that require private roads with maybe some slopes and some repairs. And so there's things in there that all of the neighbors, all of them in the subdivision, will pay homeowners do per month or per year to keep up those private, amenities.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a problem if they're behind in their HOA dues and you decided, I'm going to buy this great deal and it's a great price and I'm not going to get title insurance, but I'm going to get hung with $6,000 of HOA dues I didn't know about.
And remember, what HOA dues in bankruptcy or whatever, you still have to pay those dues, don't they? It's this very strange HOA fees and dues and homeowners associations. That's a whole world, isn't it, onto itself that is there. But it affects, obviously, some of the things that you work on as well. What else is out there that you see every day? I mean, you two are reading this stuff every day. You're seeing this. Well, I figured this out. If there were 11,900 real estate transactions in Jackson and Josephine County last year, your three offices, and don't you have to do them all locally? I mean, you have to, those 12,000, you three offices have to do them, right? The closings of those?
Especially for sale transactions, we're going to do the title insurance at the very least.
Okay. So that's like 3,000, it's like 1,000 a month or 300 each office, like 300 in a month. I mean, that's a lot of closings.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just surprised. I mean, it just amazes me that how much you actually have to do. What about fraud? I mean, is there people that try to scam the system here that you guys can catch, or tell me any of that?
I'll share a fraud story, and it actually wasn't covered by title insurance, but a few years ago we had a transaction that we closed, normal transaction, everything went fine. We sold the property. About 2 weeks after we closed, we got a call from a gentleman who represented a trust and said, I was told that I'm going to get paid out of this closing on this transaction. I have a lien against the property, and I was wondering, when you're going to call me for a payoff. So we thought, we didn't see a lien. We didn't have one. So we double checked. There was nothing. We asked him, he goes, well, I have the title report right here showing I'm going to get paid.
Oh, boy.
So we said, can you fax us a copy of your title report? That time we weren't emailing. So he did. He faxed us over a copy of the title report, and the seller had some title background and actually forged our title report. And what had happened is it was a private loan from a trust, and the borrower was supposed to record the deed of trust and failed to. And the trustee had allowed him to do so. The trustee didn't know and didn't follow up to make sure that trust deed was recorded to give public constructive notice there was a lien there. And so it never got recorded. So the seller knew that, and to get out of it, he forged our report, told the guy, you're going to get paid in 4 weeks. Well, we had closed in 2 weeks, and he was long gone.
Long gone with the money and disappeared.
So he actually forged it. That is fraudulent, and we turned it over to the Attorney General's office.
Cynthia, do you have, I'm trying to think in terms of the forgery of people that would do those kind of things. Those things really stand out, wouldn't I would suppose, when you see that.
Yeah, it doesn't happen too often in Jackson County, but every once in a while we've had a couple of instances where we had a seller, not really a seller, he was a borrower. Yeah. He had bought the property from his sister. He had actually transferred it back and forth with her a couple times and borrowed about $100,000 from a private lender, and that was insured.
On the property.
On the property.
The sister didn't know it probably.
Didn't pay a dime back and left, and the private lender called and said, I'm going to start foreclosure proceedings, and in the process of the foreclosure proceedings realized that he had forged the deed from his sister to himself. And once they talked to the sister and realized, she said, I didn't sell it, she wasn't involved,
But that's not covered by title
That
insurance.
was covered,
That is covered by
and
title
our
insurance.
underwriter actually cut a check for $100,000 to the lender.
Really?
And then we turned it over as a fraud case to the Attorney General, and we let everybody in our industry know, hey, this gentleman's name, kind of flag it, and they actually caught him up in Portland, and he's, I believe he's still in jail at
So
this
some
point.
people actually have made claims, don't they, for title insurance. If something goes wrong, you have that ability to do that.
And that's why title insurance is very important.
Yeah, but it doesn't cover everything.
Doesn't
and that's
cover
the
everything.
thing that you keep wanting to say, right?
Yeah. Well,
It
it does cover fraud, and that's important.
It does cover fraud.
Some of the
though.
fraud, if we can determine forgery.
Yeah, the biggest thing is, boy, if you have a CC&R in your area, in your world, you need to read those things and understand them, because they can really mess you up, and then people get crazy and sue each other. We don't want that to happen at all.
No.
We want you to be good real estate consumers. The Real Estate Show, one more segment to go with Donna O'Grady and Cynthia Simpson here on The Real Estate Show. We're coming right back here on KMED right after this. Real Estate Show rolls on here on KMED, January the 16th here of 2016. Pete Belcastro, one of the real estate guys with you, and thanks for joining us. Remember, you can check out all of our past shows. We've got a great website for you at realestateshowOregon.com. You can watch all the shows there, or also at youtube.com/Real Estate Show Oregon. Hey, today here on the show, we're talking with title officers, Donna O'Grady from First American Title and Cynthia Simpson from AmeriTitle here on the Real Estate Show. Boy, we've learned a lot today, and I think the most interesting thing to me is how it's different. You both have said that the East Coast and West Coast don't close properties the same way. I didn't know that. What do they do in the East Coast? It's more complicated, right?
The West Coast is more escrow driven, so we have what we call escrow officers and escrow companies, and the East Coast deals with attorneys. And so a lot of times you'll have an attorney representing the buyer, an attorney representing the seller, you'll have an attorney representing the title company and the escrow, and then you'll see some of those old-fashioned pictures of people leaning around a table fighting over documents, and that's kind of a closing on the East Coast, at least the way I picture it.
Oh, that just seems like it would, be more expensive for the consumer in the end, because you've got attorneys involved just to close. We're really smart.
Yeah.
we're really smarter out here in the West, aren't we, with that,
Of
I
course.
guess. Yeah.
Yes.
Tell people what you've seen so much over the years, because you've been doing this. People get in trouble, don't they, by allowing others to sign on to deeds or allowing other people into their properties and stuff. What's the name of that? What's that called? What is it? It's stupid, whatever it is, I guess is the thing.
No, I know where you're going. And the example I had, a pair, ranchers, two husband and wife, had a property for about 60 years, and they had their son starting to work the ranch with them, added their son and daughter-in-law onto title with them, because they thought they'd be so wise and avoid probates and future
Right.
problems. And we're just going to put son on title with us, and they'll continue to work the ranch for, about 3 more years. And they filed for divorce. The son and
The son
daughter-in-law
and the daughter filed for divorce.
filed for divorce.
Oh.
Became a real messy event. The daughter-in-law, the ex-daughter-in-law now, became the owner of a half interest in the ranch.
Sure.
The son was bounced out. And then the mom and dad ranchers were the owners of the other half of the ranch.
Wow.
So those are kind of the worried examples. And then
And that can happen on residences.
anything
I've heard
you've
of,
added.
as we age, and we get older, you want as you say, you want your child to be part of it. It's easier to give it to them, but the child can do all sorts of strange things, or the other person you put on there, can't they? And you don't even know about it.
They can borrow against their
They can
interest
borrow
if it's
against
separate.
their interest, right?
And
Yeah.
they could have judgments and liens. Perhaps they have their own business that maybe have failed, and all those creditors come attaching to your home, and they can foreclose you and remove you depending on how the interest is a survivorship or is it as tenants in common. And that becomes that real problem too. If you're adding somebody, what's going to happen in their life?
Yeah, be smart. If you're going to do that, as much as I hate saying this, you need an attorney or something with you to do this. If you're going to add somebody to title from you, and even if it's your child, I understand that and the lure to do that. But you don't know what you're going to get into. They could marry somebody, like you say, and they're going to file divorce, or I mean, it's jeez.
Yeah.
Be
And
smart.
we won't close. Title companies won't close that transaction when they're doing estate planning.
'Cause it's a dispute, right?
We'll refer them to an attorney for the ramifications of taxes and possibilities. So
Because you can't issue it because it's not clear title.
right.
Or they can't walk in and say, gosh, I want to put my son on title with me. Can you just do a deed? We can't be a part of that.
You can't
because
do
it's
that.
not an escrow. It has to be
Okay.
a written agreement and then enter into an escrow. So we do refer them to the attorneys.
That's at least one layer, isn't that? That you got to be serious about doing it in order to. Well, at least there's something there about
estate
that,
plan.
which is probably pretty fortunate. Well, we're going to be out of time here in a second. And it's really interesting because of the work you guys do, and what do you give advice for anybody? I mean, people need to know that it's there. If you have issues, you should get them settled beforehand. If you know something's on something, if you're going to sell it, you don't know it even.
We talk a lot about teamwork. That as an industry, the title companies and the real estate offices, we're partners, and we do see a lot of FSBOs in the valley, which is great.
FSBO is for sale by owner.
For sale by owner. And we would recommend that people do talk to an agent and at least get the feel for how much is involved in buying or selling a piece of property. There is a lot to it. And, we would want to say you need to make sure that you understand and get get advice from the professionals.
Yeah. Another area that I think people would get liens on, you probably see, are the property tax exemptions. When you're 62 and older, you can file and not pay those property taxes and have them come on as a lien in your property. Do you see that often? Or do people take advantage of that?
Well, they do because it's a great program.
It's a great program
for the seniors. But when they
sell the house,
that house, or if they themselves die and their family steps into the ownership, that tax is due, and it could be thousands and thousands of dollars.
I've had clients. I've actually helped them and say you should just stay where you are because you've already got $40,000 in property tax debt. You sell the place, you're going to have to pay it off. There's nothing left. So anyway, people can really get in trouble in a lot of different ways, as we obviously find out, and it can mess up the transactions to close because if you can't get clear title, as you say, you're messed up. It won't go, right? And then you've done your job by pointing those things out, and you've saved obviously then the consumer a whole lot of time and money.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's the way to do it. Well, it's good to hear that you're so busy. I just wanted to give you a quick update before we get out of here. And ladies, you comment as well. The market itself is in residential real estate is really something. That gap we've talked about continues. In December of last year, pending sales were up 22% from a year ago, but the monthly supply of inventory and the available homes per buyer is down 30% again. And so that gap of that the sales the listings are not keeping pace with the number of sales. So that gap continues to widen, and that's putting pressure on prices, why we continue to be in a seller's market. And I don't see anything that's changing. It hasn't changed now in months, and we're in the middle of winter, and that continues. But if we wanted to make it also available for you in the price range, the available month supply of homes in the areas, $0 to $150,000 price range, 1 month supply of inventory. $150,000 to $250,000, 1.15 months supply of inventory, and $250,000 to $350,000. This is Jackson County overall. There's a 1.4 month supply of inventory. That's not much. If a normal supply is 6 months, ladies, it's a seller's market, isn't it? I mean, it just continues to be that way.
And that should be encouraging to our builders to get out there and build.
Well, I was really encouraged to hear you say that you, at the preliminary stages, the title part, that you're seeing some more building activity going to take place in our valley. That's really encouraging. We really need it, and I hope that works out. Donna O'Grady, thank you for being here from First American Title, and Cynthia Simpson from American Title as well. It was great talking with you, and enjoy the rest of the day for here on the Real Estate Show. That'll do it here for January the 16th. We'll talk to you next week here on KMED. I'm Pete Belcastro. Have a great week, everybody, and God bless. We'll see you next Saturday here on KMED.
The Real Estate Show on KMED AM and FM radio, presented by John L. Scott Real Estate. state of Southern Oregon, along with all cities property management, the Home Builders Association of Jackson County, Ditech Mortgage, the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District, and the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors. For guest information or to watch a past show, visit us online at realestateshoworegon.com. Join us again next weekend for Southern Oregon's one and only real estate show on KMED.